The full story premieres tonight at 7 p.m. Don't miss it, and hit like, subscribe so you won't miss the next twist. Chapter 1. The Price of a Life. My parents spent $250,000 on my sister's wedding, but said they couldn't afford $90,000 to save my son's life. While they toasted champagne under chandeliers in California, I stood in the rain in Ohio watching a small white coffin sink into the earth. My name is Marianne Keller, and this is how losing everything taught me the real price of love and the quietest kind of revenge. I wake before the sun like I have for months and lie still long enough to hear the soft rise and fall of the oxygen concentrator in the corner of our bedroom. The machine hums and clicks like a tired refrigerator, and a green light blinks slow and steady across the wall. Eli sleeps on his side with his knees tucked up and one hand curled near his face. He is 8, and the bones of his wrist look like fragile twigs under his skin. I touch his hair and tell myself that today will be a good day. I say it in my head because I do not want my voice to shake and spook him awake. I move through the apartment in the dark and set water to boil. The kitchen in our Columbus place is small enough that I can reach the sink and the stove without taking a step. I line up his morning meds in 2 plastic cups and label them with a strip of tape that I cut long ago. I should replace the tape, but the routine comforts me. Westfield Middle School sits 5 miles away, and at this hour I would normally be writing a lab warm-up or straightening goggles. Instead, I measure out milliliters and think about heart valves and how a body can be so brave and so tired at the same time. By 7, the sun lifts over the brick buildings across the street and turns the windows the color of tea. Eli wakes and blinks at me like he is surprised to see me hovering. He asks if it is a school day, and I tell him that it is, and that I will be here when he gets home because Ms. Parker will cover my last class. He nods without speaking and sips the first cup with the concentration of a scientist. When he finishes, I plug in the portable oxygen unit and help him sit up. He leans against me for a moment, and I can feel the faint thud of his heart under his t-shirt, and I count without meaning to. Late morning, I meet Dr. Samuel Morrison in a conference room off the pediatric cardiology wing at Cleveland Clinic. He has the kind of calm that feels like a thick blanket. He shows me scans and charts, and then he folds his hands and says there is an experimental path that might fit Eli. He is careful with the words, not a miracle, a path. The therapy has helped other children with similar markers. The timing matters. The cost is about $90,000. He watches my face as he says it and adds that the hospital can help us apply for grants, but the program needs a deposit before we can schedule. He asks if I have questions. I ask all of them. He answers every one. When I leave, I sit in the lobby for 10 minutes and let the tide of relief and fear wash back and forth until I can stand. On the bus home, I draft a list in my head, call insurance again, call the district benefits line, ask Ms. Laird about leave options, start a fundraiser even if I hate the idea of laying our life out like a storefront window. I imagine the headline on a page. Single mom teacher needs help to save her son. I hate it, but I know I will write it anyway. I have learned that pride is a luxury I cannot afford. That evening after dinner, I clear a spot on the table between a pile of Eli art projects and a stack of ungraded lab reports. I spread out our medical bills so I can see the dates. The light on the concentrator blinks and slides across the paper, and for a second, the room looks like an aquarium. Eli draws a rocket on a scrap of cardboard and asks if he can tape it to the wall. I say yes, and he tells me that when he gets better, we will visit the Science Museum again and ride the hurricane simulator. I say we will. My voice is steady, but my fingers tremble on the calculator, and the sum on the screen looks like a number from someone else's life. 2 days later, I drive to Upper Arlington to talk to my parents. Their house sits on a quiet street where the lawns look combed. My father retired last spring after a long career as an engineer. He keeps his tools hung in careful rows in the garage and his retirement accounts arranged in binders on a shelf in the office. My mother curates their calendar like a job: charity brunches, garden tours, Sunday service, and lunch after with friends. I tell myself to be clear and brief. I tell myself to breathe. We sit in the kitchen. I explain the treatment option and the timeline and the cost. I say we can structure it as a loan that I will sign anything they want and repay every month until it is done. My father listens without interrupting. When I finish, he says that I need to learn to live within the limits of what is possible. He says that taking on debt for a procedure that is not guaranteed would be reckless. My mother touches my forearm and says that he is only worried about me. I say that Eli is 8. I say that we do not need a guarantee. We only need a chance. My father looks at the window as if the answer might be out there in the azaleas and says that the answer is no. I swallow and ask how they managed the deposit for Claire's wedding venue in Napa Valley. I try to make the question sound neutral and fail. He says that is a family celebration fund. He says they have saved for years for milestones, and that this is not the same as a medical emergency that could spiral. He says a wedding is an investment in stability. I feel something thin inside me tear. On the drive home, I replay my mother's voice. He is only worried about you. The words land like frost. Eli naps in the back seat with the sunlight striping his cheek through the car seat window. I tell myself to think about the fundraiser, to think in tasks and steps. At a red light, I email Lily Parker. She replies 20 minutes later. She says we will set it up properly and keep it focused on what Eli needs. She says the staff will share it and the parents will share it and that I am not alone, even if it feels like it. We launch the page on a Thursday night. I keep the story simple. I write about Eli's curiosity and how he collects facts about clouds and beetles. I write about the trial and the cost and how every dollar will go toward a deposit and travel and the medication that follows. I post one photo of him with a cardboard rocket taped to the wall. I sit on the couch and hit publish, and then I close my eyes. The first day trickles. $10 from a former student, $25 from a parent, $50 from a teacher I only know by sight. I send quiet thank you notes from my phone while Eli watches a nature show. At night I check again and tell myself not to check again, and then I do. The number crawls upward like a cautious animal. A week passes, 2 weeks, 3. It stops at 12,000 and change. I try not to do the math out loud. One evening Eli leans against me as the concentrator hums and says that he feels a little stronger today. He asks if the doctors will fix his heart soon. I look at his face. He has the same eyebrows as my father, and when he frowns he looks so much like the man who told me to be realistic that my chest aches. I tell him that we are going to keep going and that I am proud of him for being brave. He nods and tells me that brave means you do the hard thing even if you are scared. I ask where he learned that. He says he learned it from me. I turn off the lamp so he cannot see my eyes shine. After he sleeps, I wash the mugs and wipe the counter twice, even though it is already clean. I look at the taped label on the pill cup and think about how habits hold a life together when nothing else will. I stand at the bedroom door and watch the green light blink across Eli's blanket and listen to the steady monitor tone. Outside, a siren wails somewhere on Broad Street and then fades. I make a promise that feels like a vow. If they will not fight for him, I will. I will learn every form and call every number and ask again even when the answer is no. I will hold this line as long as I have breath. Then I slide into bed and lie very still until the sound of the machine and the sound of my own heart fall into the same slow rhythm. Chapter 2. Weddings and Wires. Morning brings a ping from my phone and a photo of a vineyard framed by low hills. Claire writes that the date is set for October 22nd in Napa Valley, 200 guest string quartet chef tasting this weekend. She adds a row of champagne emojis that my screen cannot show on the hospital Wi-Fi, but I can feel them anyway. I type, "I am happy for you," and add a small red heart so she will not read my hesitation as disapproval. She replies so fast that I know she had the chat open. Mom and Dad are thrilled. It will be the most beautiful weekend of our lives. That same afternoon, I watch Eli color a paper planet in triage, while a nurse threads a new line into the back of his hand. The TV in the corner plays a food show where someone shaves white truffles over a plate the size of a cymbal. I imagine a ballroom with tall flowers and think about the price of each stem, and then I force myself to stop. I tell Eli that his planet looks like Saturn in spring, and he smiles and says, "Spring is when gravity feels softer." Family group texts begin to swell. My mother posts pictures of gowns and suggests shades of champagne for the bridal party. My father sends a link to the venue and writes that the rain statistics in late October are favorable. Claire asks about shoes, then rehearsal timing, then hotel blocks. I read it all at night with the sound of the concentrator turning the room into a sea. I practice my supportive face in the reflection of the window. I can do this, I tell myself. I can be both the mother in an ICU and the sister who nods at linens. The next morning I get a separate text from my mother. She says the planner would love me as a bridesmaid. Then a pause in the bubbles. She adds a reminder that I should try not to bring heavy topics to the events. Everyone is very excited and she wants the energy to be bright. I stare at the screen. My hands feel cold even though the room is too warm. I answer, I will do my best. The words sit there like pebbles in my mouth. Dr. Morrison walks in with a folder and asks if we can talk. He tells me Eli needs to be admitted this week for prep and monitoring. He speaks plainly, so I will not fill in the silence with fear. He says the team has a slot for the trial if we can meet certain markers and sign consents. The dates on his sheet run through my head like a train schedule. I say yes. I say whatever you need. Pastor Reynolds stops by later with a thermos of coffee and a small plate of cookies that look like the kind from church bake sales. He sits by the window and asks how Eli is holding up, and then he asks how I am holding up and waits longer for that answer. He says a short prayer without the soft voice some pastors use. He sounds like a man laying a hand on a shoulder. My mother calls while he is there, and I step into the hall. She says God has a plan for Eli. She says we must not question it. I say I am not questioning God. I am questioning a choice not to help a child when the help is possible. She says she does not want to fight. I say me neither. When I go back in the room, the pastor studies my face and does not ask what she said. He says that faith walks best when it links arms with compassion. I nod and sit down, and Eli asks if the cookies are for sharing. At school the next day, Julia Laird calls me into her office. She says the district will approve unpaid leave starting immediately, and she will make sure my classes have a steady sub. She slides an envelope across the desk and tells me it is from the Union Hardship Fund and the PTA. She says there will be more later once the parent council meets and that I should not worry about the electric bill or the grocery run. I open the top and see 20s and 50s and a folded note that says "We are with you" in blue marker. Julia looks like she might cry, and I thank her and tell her I will pay every cent back. She says stop and lets out a breath. She says this is not a ledger, this is people. On the bus home, I set 3 alarms on my phone. 1 for the insurance call tomorrow, 1 for the case manager at the clinic, 1 to remember to eat lunch because I keep forgetting and then wondering why my hands shake. My mother sends another stream of photos. Flower arches, charger plates. The price tags are not attached, but I can see them like ghosts. I ask out loud who will carry Eli's chart when I am at a rehearsal dinner. Eli sleeps and does not answer. 2 days later, an email from the hospital lands in my inbox. It confirms Eli's admission and lists the consent meeting on Friday the 21st at 4 in the afternoon. Attached is a packet with explanations of risks and outcomes, and a place for my signature on each page. I print it at the nurse's station with permission and stack the pages in a manila folder the way I used to stack lab rubrics. While I am reading the second section, my phone buzzes again. It is Claire with an invite graphic in gold script. Rehearsal and dinner, Friday the 21st, 6 o'clock. Please try your best to be there. She adds a line about family unity and how appearances matter with the Whitman relatives. I type, I cannot make 6, and start to explain. Before I can send, she writes, you miss so many things and it hurts, Mom. Please do not make this about you. I stand in the hallway near a vending machine and stare at the 2 plans running on the same track. A consent meeting that could move us toward treatment. A dinner where I am supposed to smile and act like everything is fine. I feel the old urge to split myself in 2 and fail both halves. I put the phone away and walk back to the room. Eli is awake and asks if we can watch the video of the hurricane simulator again. We watch a family in ponchos laugh while a dial spins up to 70 miles per hour. He grins at the spray on the glass, and I say, we will go again when you are ready. He says when I am ready. That night I write to Claire. I tell her I will be at the hospital Friday afternoon signing consents. I tell her I will not make it to rehearsal. I add that I hope the night is wonderful and that I will send a gift to the suite. I look at the words and wonder if they sound polite or plain, if they sound like a sister or a stranger. I hit send. The reply arrives in less than a minute. You always make yourself the victim. I feel something unclasp inside me like a necklace breaking. I take a screenshot and save it to a folder I labeled simply Keep. On Thursday, Julia drops off a casserole at our apartment and sets it in the fridge without ceremony. She tells me the bake sale sign-ups are full and that parents I have never met are bringing tables and chairs. She says not to feel obligated to come. She also says to text if I want to stop by for 5 minutes and wave, because sometimes a hallway full of faces who love you can plug a hole in the week. I tell her I will see how Friday goes. Friday dawns thin and gray. The city smells like rain, even though the forecast says none. At noon, a nurse wheels Eli to imaging, and I pace the length of the waiting area 5 times. I rehearse answers to questions I have not been asked. When the case manager arrives at 3:40, she spreads the consent forms on the table and goes through them line by line. I sign with a pen the clinic provides and write my name so carefully that my hand cramps. She thanks me for reading everything. I tell her careful is the only speed I have left. My phone vibrates at 5:58. Another message from Claire. She says guests are arriving and she hopes I will reconsider. She adds a heart and a sparkle. I type a simple "I am at the hospital" and set the phone face down. The monitor at Eli's bedside ticks in soft green. A nurse adjusts the cannula and asks if I need a blanket. I say I am fine. In the hall, a code alarm chirps twice, then stops. The red indicator above the door flashes and fades. I pick up my phone again and open the folder named Keep. I read the line that says, "I always make yourself the victim," and then I look up at the red light as it blinks once more. The room feels very still except for the machine, and in that stillness, I realize a new kind of quiet has settled heavy and certain like weather that has already crossed the state line and is only now reaching our street. Chapter 3. The Funeral Before the Flowers. Rain begins, sometime after midnight, a soft patter against the hospital window that grows into a steady drumming. Eli sleeps with his mouth slightly open and his lashes damp from a fever that comes and goes like a tide. I sit in the chair and rub his hand in slow circles and count each rise of his chest while the monitor keeps time. Nurses pad in and out with the practiced quiet of people who have learned to move like water. At 3, the alarms stay calm. At 4, they flicker once and settle. At a little after 5, the line on the screen smooths out into something that looks like rest. I lean forward and call his name. He does not turn his head. A nurse is at the door, and then Dr. Morrison is there, and then there is a low murmur that makes no room for hope. He places a hand on my shoulder and says the thing he must say. I nod, because speech can tip a person over when the ground is already tilting. I press my lips to Eli's forehead and feel the last warmth leaving him, and I think that part of my heart has gone with it. I step into the hallway because I have to make the call. The rain has become a roar that fills the space between my ribs. My mother answers on the second ring, and I tell her the words. There is a pause, and I hear voices and laughter in the background, and she says they are at the florist, and can we please talk in the morning when they can focus? I look at the closed door to Eli's room and say very clearly that he is gone. She repeats the morning line and then starts to cry and says she will call me after dinner plans are final. I say nothing. She says she loves me and hangs up. I stare at the phone until the screen goes black. The hospital social worker finds me in the waiting area with a folder. She speaks in the gentle cadence of someone who has stood in this room many times. She tells me what forms we will need and asks if there is a funeral home I prefer. She gives me a list if I do not. I pick a place in Grandview Heights because it feels close enough to carry the drive in one breath. By mid-morning, the paperwork is set into motion. I sign my name on lines that ask for information I never thought I would have to supply for a child. The social worker calls the funeral director, and then the funeral director calls me and asks if I want a service before burial. I say yes. I choose Friday morning at 10 because Friday morning feels like a time when the world might be quiet enough to hear a goodbye. In the late afternoon, Claire calls. Her voice is bright at first, as if she forgot why she dialed, and then she remembers and softens it. She says she is sorry, and that she cannot imagine what I am feeling, and then she takes a breath and says there is a small scheduling issue. Their rehearsal dinner is Friday at 6 in the evening, and it will be hard on guests to attend a funeral that same day. She says no one wants to shadow the weekend with grief. I sit very still, and my hands feel perfectly warm and perfectly useless. I say that Eli will have his morning and that I am not moving it. She says perhaps Saturday will be better for me too. I say that Friday is his day. She exhales like a person who has found a traffic jam on a familiar street. I call the funeral home and confirm everything. The director speaks in sentences that are both practical and kind. He says they will take care of the death certificate and coordinate with the cemetery. He asks for the clothing I want Eli to wear and a photo for the program. I fold a small t-shirt that he loved and place it in a bag. I pick a photo of him with a cardboard rocket taped to the wall. I put both on the passenger seat and drive them over through a curtain of rain. Friday morning is gray and low, and the church smells like old wood and hymnals. The sanctuary is mostly empty, and that feels right. Julia stands near this back with two teachers from the science department and a few parents I recognize from conferences. Aunt Teresa drives from Indiana before dawn and squeezes my hands at the door and says nothing that tries to mend a thing that cannot be mended. Pastor Reynolds keeps the service simple, a few verses and a quiet prayer that sounds like a conversation between friends. A row of students from my past classes slips in and takes a pew, and I know them by posture even though they are taller now. My parents do not come. Claire does not come. When the last song fades, the church is so still that the click of the thermostat sounds like a metronome. A teacher touches my elbow and whispers that I should not look at my phone right now. She does not know that hearing this makes me reach for it. A photo fills the screen, Claire in a white dress at a vineyard gate, head tipped back, captioned with a countdown to forever. The timestamp overlaps our service by minutes. I stare at it until the letters blur, and then I press the button and slide the phone into my purse. The organist clears his throat and waits for me to stand. At the graveside, the wind presses the rain sideways, and the earth looks darker than I have ever seen it. We lower the small casket while the pastor says the last words, and I follow the box with my eyes until it disappears. A student steps forward and places a paper rocket on the mound. He says he made it last night because Eli would have liked it. I tell him thank you, and the words scratch my throat. Back at the funeral home, the director sits me down at a round table and goes over the invoice. It comes to just under $9,000, and my first thought is that grief can be itemized. I nod and say that I will find a way. He says there is no rush and that arrangements can be made. When I get home, there is a voicemail from Julia asking me to call. I do, and she says the Union Hardship Fund and the PTA Bereavement Fund have covered most of the cost, and that the florist we use at school events sent something for the service at no charge. I put my head on the kitchen table and say thank you over and over. She says that people wanted to stand in the place where help should have been. I do not ask what she means because I know. The apartment is too quiet without the hum of the concentrator. The oxygen unit sits dark in the corner, and the tape labels on the medicine cups look like relics from another house. I pick them up and put them in a shoebox with the hospital bands and the tiny socks that still smell like detergent. Aunt Teresa knocks just after dusk and sets a casserole on the counter and opens the cupboard to find plates like she has lived here all along. We sit at the table with mugs of tea we do not drink. She watches me with the eyes of someone who knows storms and says that the love I have for Eli needs somewhere to land. She says we could start something small in his name, a fund for families who cannot catch up with the bills that pile up before a surgery or for travel to a specialist. I tell her I have nothing left to give. She says we will ask others to give, and that I only need to lend his name and my stubborn hope. A thin thread of light moves in my chest and then flickers again. Saturday arrives dressed in sun like nothing bad ever happened in Ohio. I run a load of laundry and carry the shoebox to the closet and stand there until my arms ache. In California, a string quartet tunes in a courtyard and a photographer lines up gold chairs. Guests lift flutes of sparkling wine and a planner checks off lists on a clipboard. Claire steps into a frame of vines, with her dress catching the light just so. In Columbus, the ground at Greenlawn Cemetery holds a new patch of darker soil, and the paper rocket softens under the afternoon drizzle that returns. Cars pass on Broad Street, and the sound blends with the far hum of a train. I stand at the window of our apartment and press my palm to the glass and feel the cool October air sneaking through the seam. Two worlds move forward at the same hour. One glows with candles and vows. The other keeps a quieter promise, the one that says, I will remember you, I will carry you, I will make your name a place where other hearts can rest. Chapter 4. The Silence That Screams. Spring arrives like a careful guest, and I go back to Westfield with a key card that still works and a classroom that smells faintly of vinegar from the last lab. I keep my voice even and my lessons simple. I let the kids build paper bridges and test them with pennies while I count permission slips and breathe. After school, I take the number 2 bus downtown to a small office United Way. Columbus lets us use on the 3rd floor a bright room with a second-hand desk and a view of a parking lot where trees push tiny leaves into the air. On the wall, I tape a sheet of printer paper that says Eli Hart Grant in blue marker. Our fiscal sponsor sends a welcome email and a list of rules so our donations can be tax deductible. It feels like rails under my feet. Julia stops by with a notepad and a bag of chocolate chips for cookies. She says we should do a bake sale and a trivia night, and an auction for the wood toys Mr. Kim makes in the shop at school. Aunt Teresa offers to drive in on Saturdays and man a table with coffee and a tip jar. I say we will start small, and she laughs and says, small is a doorway. The first Saturday, we set up 3 folding tables in the gym. Parents bring pans of brownies and rows of cupcakes, some with wobbly hearts drawn in red frosting. The robotics club donates a basket with a homemade drone that can lift a ping pong ball. A local print shop offers a bundle of gift certificates if we can get 60 people to sign up for a newsletter. It is the kind of scrappy civic math I understand. People come. A dad from my 3rd hour class bids on a quilt. A grandmother slips a 20 into the jar and tells me about her grandson who had a surgery in Cincinnati. When the gym empties and the lights click off, we count, and the number makes a small stack on the table. 2 weeks later, a hardware store on High Street hears about the effort and offers a matching grant up to $10,000 if we hit 10 on our own within the month. I print the email and tape it beside our sign. The kids ask if they can run a booth at lunch to sell friendship bracelets and slime. Julia says only if they clean up every speck of glitter. They do. By the end of the 3rd week, the thermometer graphic that Lily doodled on a poster climbs another red square and then another. I watch the number pass 10 and then 15 and then 20. At night, I sit in the little office and enter each donation into the spreadsheet the fiscal sponsor template gave me. The boxes line up. The totals rise. I close my eyes and try to remember the exact pitch of Eli's laugh when the hurricane machine hit 70 miles per hour. My mother calls on a Tuesday after dinner. I step into the hallway outside my apartment and lean against the cool paint. Her voice is careful. She says that Richard made a bad investment with a friend from church and they lost $40,000. She says that Claire is not staying with Jeffrey at the moment and that everything feels like it is folding. She starts to cry and says maybe God is testing us. I stare at the light fixture above my head and listen to the hum, and then I answer. I say maybe God is teaching us how to be kind. She is quiet. Then she says she wants to come by, and I tell her I am not ready for that. She sighs and says she understands. We hang up, and I feel both lighter and heavier. That night, an email arrives from Claire. The subject line is blank. The single sentence reads, "You won, are you happy now?" I look at it until the white screen burns my eyes. I forward it to Pastor Reynolds without a note. 10 minutes later, he replies and asks if he can reach out to Claire. I type yes. In the morning, he texts me that he invited her to the fundraiser next week. He says he would like to see the family in the same room, even if no one speaks. I do not answer because I do not know what I want. In April, a reporter named Anne Morales calls from the Columbus Gazette. She says she saw a flyer about our auction in a coffee shop and asks if she can do a short piece on a teacher who started a fund in her son's memory. I meet her at the office during my prep period and tell her about the fiscal sponsorship and the bake sales and the way this city has held out both hands. I tell her that we plan to cover hotel costs for families who have to drive to Cleveland for consults, and that we will require hospital documentation because we are small and must be careful. I do not say anything about my parents or about Claire. She asks for a photo, and I give her the one of Eli with the cardboard rocket because even in silence it tells the part that matters. The story goes up online on a Wednesday. The headline sits clean and plain over a photo of me standing near the window with the parking lot trees doing their best behind me. The comments are kind. A woman from my church years ago writes that she remembers Eli running down the aisle during a Christmas pageant. The hardware store posts that they will extend the matching window another week. The principal of a school across town emails to ask if their PTA can host their own bake sale for the fund. I walk home with a paper bag of groceries and feel like the city itself has put an arm around my shoulders. That night, my mother comments on the Gazette Facebook share. She writes, "We wish we could have done more." It is a small sentence and a large one. People read it. A man from my parents' neighborhood replies and says you were at the florist. Someone I recognize from church youth committee writes that she remembers a rehearsal dinner request. I do not join the thread. I close the app and set the phone face down and breathe in and out until the ceiling stops spinning. In the morning, my aunt calls and tells me not to look at social media. I tell her I already did. By the end of the month, the thermometer poster hits 30,000. United Way sends a note that the first round of microgrants can be approved under our sponsorship and asks me to gather a small committee so that decisions are not mine alone. I ask Julia and Aunt Teresa and Mr. Kim from the shop. We sit at the table in the office with a carafe of coffee and a stack of applications, and we read. A mother from Zanesville needs help with gas and a motel, while her son does tests at Nationwide Children's. A father in Dayton is out of sick days and needs a grocery card to get through a week. We approve 5 small grants, and I sign letters on paper that makes the printer shake. On Sunday, I slip into a back pew at church. My parents are not there. The choir sings a hymn that I used to hum to Eli when the monitor beeped too fast and I leave before the last verse. Outside, I nearly bump into Pastor Reynolds. He studies my face and speaks in a voice that lives somewhere between stern and kind. He says faith does not save without compassion. I nod. He says he hopes I will not harden in the places that hurt because he has seen how hard it is to soften a heart that has set. I tell him I am trying to build a place to put the love that has nowhere to go. He smiles and says that sounds like prayer. A week later, I hear that my parents have stopped attending their club socials and that Claire has moved to a friend's place in German Village. An old neighbor texts that people have questions and that silence is answering all of them. I do not feel vindicated. I feel tired. Then I sit with our spreadsheet and watch as a donation from a woman in Cincinnati arrives with a note that says her sister slept in a car the night before a consult and that she hopes this will stop someone else from doing the same. In the late afternoon, I drop my bag on the chair in the office and straighten the crooked tape at the corner of our sign. The printer hums and spits out the batch of thank you letters I queued before lunch. I stack them and slide them into envelopes and press the seals closed with the back of a spoon because I have not bought a sponge yet. Outside, the sun drifts low and the parking lot trees fling long shadows over the asphalt. I stand by the window and read the words on the paper I taped up when this was only an idea. Eli Hart Grant Foundation, saving hearts one child at a time. The glass holds the fading light and the room warms to a soft gold. I rest my palm against the cool pane and stay there until the words blur and the day settles into quiet again. Chapter 5. The Price They Paid. 2 years pass like a river you learn to wade instead of fight. By early spring of 2025, our paperwork comes back from the IRS, and a white envelope with a federal seal confirms what we built in a borrowed office. Eli Hart Grant Foundation is now a standalone 501c3. The letter shakes in my hands, and then I press it flat and laugh once in a room that still smells like printer toner. We have helped 18 families since last year, most with travel and hotels, and a bridge of groceries when paychecks ran thin $3,000 to $5,000 at a time. I keep a map on the wall with pushpins in Zanesville and Dayton and Lima, and a single bright pin for a girl in Toledo who sent a photo of herself holding a stuffed rocket she said reminded her of Eli. One morning in February, an email arrives from my mother. The subject line is 4 words that make my throat close. Your father wants to see you. The message is short. He is at Riverside Methodist. It is serious. He keeps asking for you. I stare at the screen until the letters blur, and then I grab my coat and a scarf that still smells like last winter, and I take a cab because the bus would take too long. The sky is the color of tin, and the sidewalks shine with a skin of ice, the kind that looks like glass and lies about its grip. Outside his room, I pause with my hand on the doorframe. Machines whisper and click inside. My mother sits in a chair with a paper cup, and her shoulders look smaller than I remember. She rises when she sees me and opens her mouth and closes it again. I nod once. She sits. I walk to the bed. My father looks like someone who forgot to bring his body along. His hands are folded on top of the blanket, as if he is still measuring something none of us can see. He turns his head and finds my face. He tries to speak, and the sound fails and then returns. He says my name slowly as if it weighs more than usual. He says he is sorry. He says he thought responsibility meant keeping numbers straight, and he did not understand that compassion is a form of math too. He says he did not know how much he loved Eli until the house got quiet, and the tools sat untouched, and the accounts stopped making sense. I listen. I feel like a field in winter, hard at the surface and wet underneath. I tell him that I am not here for money or for explanations. I tell him I needed him to look at Eli with the same softness he saved for plans and projects. He closes his eyes, and 2 tears find the lines near his ears. He says he wishes he had understood sooner. I touch his hand. It is warm and thin, and it makes me think of balsa wood from my school lab. We sit like that until his breath deepens and the monitors relax into steady numbers. My mother watches us without speaking. In the hallway, she whispers that she has made so many wrong turns. I say that wrong turns are still proof you were moving. She nods once and folds the paper cup until it makes a soft crack. I tell her I will come again tomorrow. She says thank you and looks at the floor like it might answer a question. I ride the elevator down and stand on the sidewalk and breathe air so cold it hurts. He dies 3 weeks later on a gray Wednesday that smells like wet wool. The funeral is small. Pastor Reynolds keeps it simple and honest, and I ask him to say Eli's name because it feels right to let them share a page. My mother holds a handkerchief that belonged to her grandmother and folds it into smaller and smaller squares. Claire stands beside her in a dark coat with a thread pulling loose at the cuff. After the burial, they ask me to come back to the house. I say not today. They nod as if they knew that would be my answer. I go home and make soup and open the window an inch to let the steam out and the cold in. By April, I have a speech to finish. The Ohio Health Conference wants me to talk about community compassion. They ask for 15 minutes and slides if I have them. I do not want slides. I want a story people can carry in their pockets and touch when they need to remember why money should move like water and not like stone. I write in the evenings at the office with the blinds open so the light can drain out of the sky while I work. I practice in the empty room and time myself with the clock on my phone. I cut sentences that sound pretty but do not help. I keep the ones that feel like a hand on a shoulder. The day of the conference, I wear the navy suit I bought secondhand and a pair of flats I know I can stand in. The convention center hums with coffee and name badges and the high gloss of professional chatter. Backstage, a woman with a clipboard checks my mic and asks if I need water. I tell her I'm fine. When I step out, the lights make the room a blur, and then my eyes adjust and I see the shapes sort into faces. In the last rows near an aisle, my mother sits with her shoulders pinned straight, and Claire sits beside her with both hands wrapped around a program. I taste metal, and then I breathe and begin. I tell them that love is often measured in dollars in our country, and that is not entirely wrong. Money can operate like love when it shows up at the right time and without making a show of itself. I tell them about hotels and gas cards and grocery gift cards and how small numbers can hold a family together while they make bigger choices. I tell them there is no miracle in what we do. There is steady effort and honest accounting and a belief that no one should walk alone down a fluorescent hallway while a doctor explains the cost of hope. My voice settles into the story and carries me along. I speak about the first 5 grants we made, and the father who sent a photo of a motel receipt with a note that said he slept for 6 hours for the first time in a week. I say that we helped 18 families because a city decided that heartbreak could be repurposed. Then I stop and let the room be quiet, and I say the line that held my pen steady when I wrote it late at night. We often measure love by what we spend. I learned that real love is what we are willing to give up. A camera on a track slides past the first row, and the image on the screen behind me widens and shifts. For a moment, it finds the back of the hall. My mother's face fills the frame and her mouth trembles, and she presses her program to her chest. Claire reaches for her hand and holds it like a child on a curb waiting for the signal to cross. I finish with a thank you, and the room stands, and the applause feels like a wave you let hit you because you are tired of bracing. Afterward, in the hall outside the ballroom, I pose for a photo with a nurse from Toledo who brought her whole unit to the morning panels. I sign a program for a social worker whose own brother needed a hotel last year. I tuck the pen back into my pocket and turn, and my mother stands 3 feet away. Her eyes look older and thinner at the same time. She speaks first, and her voice is softer than I remember. She says she would like to hug me if that would be allowed. I do not move for a count of 3, and then I open my arms and let her in. She shakes and whispers I am sorry into the fabric of my jacket. I answer without anger. I tell her I forgive her. I say I am not forgiving because she earned it. I am forgiving because I want a quiet mind. She nods into my shoulder and we stand there until the air around us settles. Claire steps forward next and asks if I will ever let her help. I tell her help looks like showing up when it is heavy and not only when the lights are good. She nods and says she understands and that she wants to learn. I tell her the office is open most evenings and that we always need people to fold letters and seal envelopes and carry tables. She almost smiles. That night I go home by way of the river. The water slides under the bridges with the patience of a thing that knows it will get where it is going. In the apartment, I turn on the lamp by the photo of Eli. He is grinning with the cardboard rocket beside him, and the light catches the edge of the frame and makes a thin gold line. On the wall across from it hangs the logo we designed for the foundation after the 501c3 letter came. a small heart tucked inside a larger one with a trail that looks like a flight path. I sit on the couch and listen to the city in the alley and feel the calm space that arrives when the story has made a full circle. If you have ever been left standing alone by people who were supposed to love you, I hope you hear me now. You can take the worst thing and shape it into something that holds other people up. You can forgive without forgetting and set a boundary that keeps you whole. If this spoke to you, tell me what you would have done in my place and what you are building out of your own hard season. Stay with me for the next stories we tell, not because the world is tidy, but because together we can make some part of it kinder.